Radio Paris, Radio Paris, Radio Paris est allemand, Radio Paris ment, Radio Paris ment, Radio Paris est allemand.
Voici une nouvelle de très grande importance. Nous allons vous lire le premier communiqué du commandant en chef du corps expéditionnaire américain. Le commandant en chef du corps
Dixième bulletin d'information de la BBC. Veuillez tout d'abord écouter quelques messages personnels. La fortune vient en dormant. Heureux qui communiste a fait un long voyage. De Marie-Thérèse à Marie-Louise.
Hey everybody, it's the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm Aaron Maté, sitting in for Jimmy here with Americans comedian Kurt Metzger, and we are covering the fallout from this explosive scoop by Seymour Hersh, revealing how the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Now, Seymour Hersh has won every journalistic accolade that you can get. The Pulitzer, the George Polk Award. He's broken so many impactful stories, from the My Lai massacre in Vietnam to the Abu Ghraib torture scandal. So he's not someone you can dismiss very easily. So how is the U.S. media responding to his scoop that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in a covert operation? Well, deafening silence. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN haven't touched this. The only response that Seymour Hersh is getting is from, lowercase outlets like something called Business Insider. And their response is to try to denigrate Seymour Hersh. So this is the headline from Business Insider. The claim by a discredited journalist that the U.S. secretly blew up the Nord Stream pipeline is providing a gift to Putin.
Mia Jankowicz. Is that a Ukrainian name by any chance?
Well, I was thinking, I wonder if she's related to Nina Jankowicz. Remember her? She was the person who was going to head the
that's a good,
disinformation board.
Very good chance of that.
Yeah. Well, certainly they're related in spirit, because they're calling Seymour Hersh, one of the most decorated and accomplished journalists of all time, discredited. And of course, they're saying how his reporting is a gift to Putin.
Wait, how has he been discredited? Is there where is that just pulled out of her ass, or is that a real...
They're going to try to show us how, but it's really funny how they try and fail. So this is Glenn Greenwald responding. Cy Hersh is one of the most accomplished and important journalists of his generation. Someone who works for Business Insider, Mia Jankowicz, has never broken a story of note in her life. This is how she and that site describe Hersh's report on the U.S. blowing up Nord Stream. And this is how they do it. So this is what they say here. The once celebrated journalist Seymour Hersh made unproven claims that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. Hersh won a Pulitzer in 1970, but his more recent work has come under sharp criticism. Nice use of the passive voice there. Sharp criticism from State Department propagandists. That's correct. Yes. But Russia pounced on his claim, swiftly endorsing it despite there being no current evidence of its truth. So the only time U.S. media gets skeptical about claims is when they happen to undermine U.S. state propaganda, which is pretty interesting. When it's many anonymous sources making demonstrably false claims, you don't see this kind of skepticism in outlets like this.
I heard Russia's paying bounties on American troops in Afghanistan.
Exactly. Hersh was once widely celebrated for his journalism, which uncovered the 1969 My Lai massacre in Vietnam and also helped expose U.S. abuses at Abu Ghraib in 2004. But in recent decades, he has come under criticism by those who call it poorly sourced, conspiratorial, and over-reliant on anonymous sources.
Is that right? Wow.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Okay.
And this is my favorite part. The open source investigative outlet Bellingcat was deeply critical of his reporting on chemical attacks in Syria. Okay. So whenever you need someone to be discredited in U.S. media, someone who reports critically about U.S. state power, you can always trot out what is described as the open source investigative outlet Bellingcat.
Again, Bellingcat, never heard of him till I was working on this show. No one I know has ever heard of him.
No.
They quote him all the time like there's some amazing
yes
Who knows who Bellingcat is that doesn't work in the media? Anyone?
Nobody, because what they are is basically they're a U.S. state-funded propaganda organization that poses as what is described here as an open source
I thought it
investigative
was just
outlet.
a concerned British citizen who could no longer stand by and watch Putin's crimes.
Unfortunately not. And look, this is how credible Bellingcat is. So this is from a report. This is from a leaked report put out. It was prepared for the British Foreign Office by one of their contractors called the Zinc Network. It's called Upskilling to Upscale, Unleashing the Capacity of Civil Society to Counter Disinformation. This is from June 2018. And notice here at the bottom, it says, private and confidential, not for public distribution. And this is why. Because this report prepared for the British Foreign Office acknowledges that Bellingcat, their own partner, is full of it and can't be trusted. This is what they say. Other concerns included that, quote, Bellingcat was somewhat discredited both by spreading disinformation itself and by being willing to produce reports for anyone willing to pay. So that's the private assessment of the British government, which is a partner of Bellingcat and helps to fund it through various cutouts.
Is this that like that Intel input by proxy shit that Paul Mason?
Exactly. Yes. So that's what Bellingcat's own state sponsors privately think of it. But in public, we're supposed to believe that Bellingcat's some sort of credible open source investigation. And this is, they even themselves talk about what their so-called open source expertise is based on. This is from the New York Times, and they're talking about the founder of Bellingcat, a guy named Elliot Higgins. The blogger Elliot Higgins made waves early in the decade by covering the war in Syria from a laptop in his apartment in England. Okay.
What?
So, yes. Covering the war in Syria from his laptop in England. Okay. And then it says this, Mr. Higgins attributed his skill not to any special knowledge of international conflicts or digital data, but to the hours he spent playing video games.
How did they find him?
Maybe on a video game forum.
Well,
I don't know.
So he's covering the war in Syria from a laptop, which like who would do that?
Yes.
So was he already being paid to do that?
I don't know. I don't know who found who, but the point is somebody found him to pretend that it was some sort of digital Sherlock. And accordingly, Bellingcat's been paid a lot of money by NATO states to put out propaganda that aligns with their interests. And one of their funders, this is from the Bellingcat's website, is something called the National Endowment for Democracy. Right. And what is the National Endowment for Democracy? It's a cutout of the CIA for propaganda operations. And now eventually it was getting so embarrassing for Bellingcat to be made fun of for being funded by the National Endowment for Democracy that they switched it up. They got funding from news sources. And the Gray Zone reported on their new sponsors. This is from my colleague Click Clarenberg back in 2021. And it says Bellingcat funded by US and UK intelligence contractors that aided extremists in Syria. So rather than getting the US government to directly fund Bellingcat, someone thought, all right, let's get the contractors that are paid by the US government, let's get them to fund Bellingcat. And here's a table from Bellingcat. The groups include, you can see there, Adam Smith International and K-Monix. And both of these companies have made a lot of money off of the dirty war on Syria. Adam Smith International, you might recognize it from the war in Iraq, when after the Bush administration invaded Iraq and tried to privatize Iraq's economy, Adam Smith got the contract to help take part in that effort. So that's who now is helping to fund Bellingcat. Not the U.S. state itself, but just U.S. state war profiteers.
Is that named after the old-timey Adam Smith? That's like the big...
The father of capitalism, yeah.
And so that's a weird, okay.
Adam Smith International, they're spreading capitalism internationally.
Oh.
With the help of Bellingcat. And this is from a leaked email that the Gray Zone also obtained. This is from Paul Mason, who is a British media personality, I guess you can call him that, who was trying to plot about how to basically destroy the Gray Zone with some colleagues of his. And he called for this. He says,
that's it.
He says, what this really needs, what our plot really needs to take down the Gray Zone, the website I worked for, founded by Max Blumenthal, what it really needs is intel service input by proxy, e.g. Bellingcat. And that's what Paul Mason privately admitted, that Bellingcat really is intel service by proxy. He's exactly right.
So what is it? He didn't have his account password strong enough for something stupid like that, or wasn't encrypted?
He wasn't taking care of his emails, so that's why we can know that he agrees with us. What we say publicly, which is that Bellingcat is the intel service by proxy. We find out from Paul Mason's emails that he agrees with us too. He just won't say it publicly. He says it in private.
I went down a whole hole of watching Paul Mason videos after this, back when this happened, and he is a twat. Wow.
but sometimes they make it open. Listen to this. This is a headline from Foreign Policy not long ago. Bellingcat can say what U.S. intelligence can't. Okay. And here's a former CIA deputy chief of operations in Europe and Eurasia, Mark Polymeropoulos. This guy, we've quoted him before.
Polymeropoulos.
He came down with Havana syndrome, so hopefully he's recovering from that. Yeah. He says, I don't want to be too traumatic, but we love this. He's talking about Bellingcat. We love this. Yes, they do, because Bellingcat is doing their job, the job of the intelligence agencies that they work with. And so Bellingcat took issue with Sy Hersh's reporting about Syria. And what Sy Hersh revealed was that while the U.S. was publicly accusing Syria of committing a chemical attack in Ghouta in August 2013, Sy Hersh reported that privately, U.S. intelligence collected a lot of information that in reality, the sectarian death squads in Syria had their own chemical weapons program, and that the intelligence that the Syrian government was guilty of this attack was not there, that they actually had no evidence at all. That's what Seymour Hersh reported in the London Review of Books in late 2013 and 2014. And he was attacked for that, including by Bellingcat. But then Hersh got corroborated by an unlikely source, Barack Obama. And so I tweeted this: to those dismissing Sy Hersh because he challenged Syria chemical weapons allegations, you haven't heard from Barack Obama. Hersh reported that U.S. intelligence raised doubts about the claim that Syria used chemical weapons in Ghouta in August 2013. Obama later admitted that the intelligence he was given about Syrian guilt was not a slam dunk. And that's a deliberate reference to Iraq WMDs, because when George Tenet, then the director of the CIA, went to George W. Bush and said, we have proof that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, he said the case was a slam dunk. So this is from Politico. Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, interrupted President Obama's daily briefing to tell him the intelligence on Syria's use of sarin gas was not a slam dunk. And it goes on to say here that that was a deliberate reference to the Iraq War. So that was James Clapper's way of saying that they did not have the intelligence that Syria was guilty of a chemical attack, because they knew, as Hersh later reported, that actually the rebels in Syria had their own chemical weapons. And there's been a lot of evidence coming out since pointing to actually that attack being carried out by the sectarian death squads. So people trying to dismiss Seymour Hersh for reporting something that's turned out to be 100% accurate. And there were even Obama administration officials at the time of this leaking similar claims. So look at this. This is from the Associated Press.
I remember this because at the time he was getting trashed because he said the red line was chemical weapons.
Yep.
And I remember people talking about it, like Obama they crossed red line and we didn't even punish them.
Exactly. And the reason why he didn't punish Syria is because he was told that the intelligence wasn't there, as Seymour Hersh reported. And these are U.S. officials leaking this. U.S. intelligence on weapons is no slam dunk. And they were leaking this at the time because they were worried that Obama was going to bomb Syria based on an Iraq WMD level lie. And so they leaked stuff like this to undermine that.
상대 지상 중장거리 전략 단도탄 북극성 2형 시험 발사에서 완전 성공. 경의하는 최고領導자 김정은 동지께서 새 전략무기 시험 발사를 현지에서 지도하셨습니다.
Nous avons en effet obtenu par nos services et les services de nos alliés des preuves que du chlore, des armes chimiques, avaient été utilisées. Nous avons ensuite obtenu la preuve que ces armes pouvaient être attribuées, l'utilisation du chlore, puisque c'est de cela dont il s'agissait, pouvait être attribuée au régime syrien.
We can speak now to the Labour peer and former head of the Royal Navy, Lord West. He joins us from our Westminster studios. And thank you very much for your time this morning. You've been casting some doubt on what's been happening, the evidence, according to our own Defence Secretary, according to President Macron of France and others, about what happened in Douma, saying that the evidence doesn't really fit well for President Assad ordering a chemical attack. Just tell us more about your thoughts on that, first of all.
Yes, President Assad is in the process of winning this civil war, and he was about to take over and occupy Duma, all that area. He'd had a long, long, hard slog, slowly capturing that whole area of the city. And there, just before he goes in and takes it all over, apparently he decides to have a chemical attack. It just doesn't ring true. It seems extraordinary because clearly he would know that there's likely to be a response from the Allies. What benefit is there for his military? Most of the rebel fighters, this disparate group of Islamists had withdrawn. There were a few women and children left around. What benefit was there militarily in doing what he did? I find that extraordinary. Whereas we know that in the past some of the Islamic groups have used chemicals, and of course there would be huge benefit in them labelling an attack as coming from Assad, because they would guess quite rightly that there'd be a response from the US, as there was last time, and possibly from the UK and France.
Is it fair to say, though, that you're looking at this from the point of view of strategy and tactics rather than any evidence?
Absolutely, although we do know that the reports that came from there were from the White Helmets, who, let's face it, are not neutrals. You know, they're very much on the side of the disparate groups who are fighting Assad, and also the World Health Organization doctors who are there. And again, those doctors are embedded in amongst the groups, doing fantastic work, I know, but they're not neutral. And I am just a little bit concerned, because as we now move to the next phase in this war, if I were advising some of the Islamist groups, many of whom are worse than Daesh, I would say, look, we've got to wait until there's another attack by Assad's forces, particularly if they have a helicopter overhead or something like that and they're dropping barrel bombs, and we must set off some chlorine, because we'll get the next attack from the Allies. And there's no doubt that if we believe he's done a chemical attack, we should do that. And those attacks will get bigger. And it is the only way they have got, actually, of stopping the inevitable victory of Assad.
Are you saying that there may be something faulty with the intelligence, the proof that President Macron has said he has, with the, to quote the Defence Secretary here, Gavin Williamson, the significant body of intelligence which suggests the Assad regime is responsible for what happened in Douma? Are you suggesting there may be faulty intelligence behind all of this?
I think if it's saying it suggests it did it, I'm not sure that's strong enough. If they've got, and I'm not privy to this, if they've got really good intelligence, let's say, for example, GCHQ or NSA intercepts of Syrian officers discussing an attack and saying, yes, let's use chlorine, then okay, fine. And I have no difficulty with what was done, none at all. I think if he has used chemical weapons, it's absolutely right to do a rap across his knuckles to show him that the international community are not willing to put up with this, and it's right to do it. But I just wonder, you know, we've had some bad experiences on intelligence. When I was Chief of Defence Intelligence, I had huge pressure put on me politically to try and say that our bombing campaign in Bosnia was achieving all sorts of things, which it wasn't. I was put under huge pressure. So I know the things that can happen with intelligence, and I would just like to be absolutely sure.
We know that the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Friday, or accused a Western state on Friday of perhaps fabricating evidence in Douma or somehow being involved with what happened in Douma. Given that we're in an information war with Russia on so many fronts, do you think perhaps it's inadvisable to be stating this so publicly, given your position and your profile? Isn't there a danger that you're muddying the waters?
Well, I think the answer is, if there's a real concern, let's face it, if he hasn't done it, then that is extremely bad news. You know, if Assad hasn't carried out the attack, and I think it's just worth making that clear. I think our government's policy towards Assad has not been clever since 2013. To say we're not going to have anything to do with him, he's not the president, we're not going to have anything to do with him, is flying in the face of realpolitik, of facts on the ground. And he's a nasty, unpleasant, horrible person. There's no doubt about that. But the reality is he's there. And our policy of not talking to him almost has, if anything, prolonged this civil war.
Do you have concerns, though, about giving credence, perhaps, to the Russians?
Well, I have to say that the Russians talking about another power doing it is complete nonsense. And the Russians, I'm afraid, lie as a matter of policy. So I have no truck with that. And so I'm not paying attention to what they're saying, to be quite honest. It's just my concern. You know, militarily, it just seems extraordinary. And I don't think we can always rely on some of the reports that come from within these areas because it's not from neutral observers.
But if you are right and an opposition group, a rebel group, did do this, then the Western nations who've been involved in these strikes have made a massive blunder, haven't they? And the implications are huge.
Well, certainly, if that is the case, we've been duped. But these things happen in war. And, but I think, yes, we would have been duped. And I think we will learn a lesson from that because if it's done again, we'll be a little bit more careful. But as I say, I hope, against hope, that they have got absolutely cast iron intelligence, in which case the action that was conducted was absolutely right to slap him across his wrist. There is no doubt Assad is a loathsome man. There's no doubt in the past he has used chemical weapons, and there is a real danger of this creeping acceptance of chemical weapons being used, and that is a worry. So that's really the balance of how I would put across my view.
OK, Lord West, thank you very much.
And Seymour Hersh later reported exactly what they were concerned about. And so they tried to use Bellingcat to dismiss him about Syria. Okay, that's Syria. And then Insider also says Vox raised doubts about Hersh's infamous 2015 claim that President Barack Obama did not, in fact, mastermind the killing of Osama bin Laden.
He didn't?
So what Hersh reported, it was that the White House had said that they tracked down bin Laden through some master sleuthing of the CIA, that they followed bin Laden through his courier. What Hersh reported was that actually a walk-in happened. A witness came into a U.S. facility in Pakistan and told them that actually we know where bin Laden is hiding. And he's actually there under the protection of the Pakistani security services. And Hersh reported that. And right after Hersh reported that, the White House denied it. Okay, they said it's not true. But then guess what? Here's NBC News. Pakistani asset helped in hunt for bin Laden, sources say. Sources tell NBC that an ex-Pakistani official helped in the search for bin Laden, and that some Pakistani officials knew where Osama was hiding. So that was NBC's story of basically corroborating Hersh's reporting without giving him credit.
Why? So the reason to lie about that was because we went into Pakistan, they're our ally, and we wanted to pretend like... Because
we pretended, Obama claimed that we went into Pakistan without them knowing, that we went in there in this daring raid to kill bin Laden. What happened was the U.S. was cooperating with allies inside the Pakistani military who were willing to basically turn on their other people inside their government who had been protecting bin Laden.
Oh, I actually thought at the time they were making that up because they were trying to give them some credit too because we invaded their... So it's interesting. I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to protect the Pakistani government from criticism from their own people for allowing a raid on their country to happen. So that was a part of it. And they also wanted us to, if you watch the movie Zero Dark 30, you're supposed to think that we learned about bin Laden and other important intelligence through torture. In reality, it was exactly as Hersh reported, and NBC News confirmed that a witness came in and spilled the beans. And Hersh reported that first, and they hate him because he got the truth and he exposed their lies, as he's doing once again with the Nord Stream 2.
Radio Paris, Radio Paris, Radio Paris est allemand. Radio Paris, Radio Paris, Radio Paris est allemand. Radio Paris, Radio Paris, Radio Paris est allemand. Radio Paris, Radio Paris, Radio Paris est allemand.